And so that note sounds 6 times the frequency. So you would pull out the 1 1/3 stop to get that. This note, E, sounds at 5 times the frequency. We'd pull out the stop for 1 3/5 to get that frequency. Okay. So the question is, how do we do the calculations? Well, I'm going to show you a new thing. It's an PDF document. I've just got a blank page there on purpose because I didn't want to have too much at a time. We assume 1 octave is represented by 12 semitones, which are divided into 100 cents. And those 100 cents are spaced along the axis and not along the slide rule, if you understand what I mean. Between C and the next C, there are 1200 cents, all right? And I've just, to save myself time, I just said, no, it's not an extraterrestrial, it's equal temperament. So how do we calculate exactly how many cents G is at? Well, the G dashed is 3 times the frequency. So it is log 3 along the slide rule scale. And log 2 corresponds to 1200 cents. So if I divide that into that multiplied by 1200, that G will be 1901 cents above the fundamental. Got me so far?
Yeah. Yeah.
Any dissenters?
Oh, plenty.
Well, unfortunately, I had a mishap with the program, and so I've had to come back on. So I've missed some. So anyway, I'll try and catch up.
Yeah. Well, I think you'll see. I think will see. Right now, the E double dashed is 5 times the frequency, so we have to scale from log 2 up to 1200 by dividing by log 2, and the E is 2786 cents approximately. Okay, now we can calculate what a perfect third is. That is 2 octaves and a third. So if we take away 2 octaves from the 2786, 386 is the perfect third.
Yeah, right.
Now, on equal temperament, it would be 400 cents because it's 4 semitones above the fundamental, and each semitone is worth 100 cents. All right? Mm-hmm. So the perfect third is 14 cents flat on equal temperament, which is remarkable because I remember when I was at university, I heard from the choral scholars and kings, David Wilcox always saying he wanted his thirds higher, please. Yeah. And they'd get into the pub in the evening, they'd sing something with the perfect third pitched, a third pitched almost to a fourth. You must get it higher, gentlemen, you see. But actually a perfect third is lower than an equal temperament third. What about the fifth? Well, there's the fifth. Well, there's the 12th. So if we take off a whole octave, that gets us to nearly 702 cents, which is slightly, the perfect fifth is slightly sharp on the equal temperament scale, which would be 700. So when you tune equal temperament, you must in fact go round the cycle of fifths, C, G, G, D, D, E, D, A, and so on, and tune them all slightly down a bit so that you get a beat between the notes. And I'll explain, my last task will be to explain why that beat appears. Now, so 12 perfect fifths, it turns out 12 of those is that, which is a bit more than 7 octaves. So 7 1200s is 8400, and it's 23.4 cents higher. Well, approximately. And this is what, have you heard of the Pythagorean comma?
Yeah.
And that's what it is, 23.46 cents. So it's almost a quarter of a semitone higher, which is distinct. But of course, when you split it between 12 semitones, it's a tolerable beat. Right, finally, on this little bit, we can come to how did they do mean tone originally? Well, 4/5 takes you C to G to D to A to E. So if you did, we know what E is, we worked it out up here, right? If we divide that number by 4, we get this, which is somewhat down on the 700. So that means in order to make the fifths fit with a perfect third, we've got to flatten the fifths. And in fact, we have to flatten them about 5 cents each, 5 out of 100. So that's a very distinct beat. But Renaissance tuners found that perfectly acceptable because they didn't use keys like F sharp major, which is about as far as you can get from C. Okay, so the first attempt was to do sort of mean tone and separating it out like that. Gradually, they got various forms of well temperament. So I can just list you some of the, here are some of the people who were involved, not Fourier, he was a mathematician, and we're going to bring him up in a moment. But Werkmeister, late 17th century, Kellner, Neidhart, the organ which Malcolm is going to talk about, I believe is tuned to he says is tuned to Neidhart systems. It's thought that one or the other of these tried equal temperament, but it never caught on, and they stuck to what we call well temperament, which was what Bach probably used for his great monumental 48 preludes and fugues. There was also a man called Velotti. He was very much, sorry about the, I sometimes do typos. He was very much in favor by Tartini, and they all had their little methods of trying to get something which sounded good in keys which were far away from C, but weren't exactly the same. And it's probable that Beethoven also played on instruments which were well tempered and not exactly equal tempered. Interestingly enough, Beethoven never wrote a sonata in B minor, which is not too far from C, nor did he, he wrote one bagatelle, I think, and that was it. So each key definitely had a nature, and I think this system of tempering the tuning between a mean tone a pure mean tone temperament and equal temperament, and doing a compromise was well regarded. The last man who made an attempt of it was a man called Thomas Young. Now, he was not really, he was a fellow of the Royal Society. He was regarded as the last man who knew virtually everything. And he proposed for example, the wave nature of light. His theories and his work inspired people like Herschel, Helmholtz, James Clerk Maxwell and Einstein to proceed further with their mathematical theories. But he was the last person who, as far as I know, produced a well-tempered system of tuning. I put Fourier in because Fourier was the man to whom mathematicians look to anything to do with waves. And as music, the sound we hear is due to waves going through the air, the vibrations of the molecules. This is where we shall next go to. So I now go to my last diagram, if I can find it. There it is. Right.
Right.
So imagine this is, well, I've actually set it, I've set it at 220. Which is NA below middle C. All right, but it doesn't really matter. This control, I'm sorry that it's because the computer is all having to process Zoom at the same time as doing some fairly hard calculations on my software. Okay, so it lags a bit, but can you see that I've got the same wave? I'm just merely changing the time scale. So if I bring it right down, I get more of the waves in on the graph. Okay, if I bring it up to here, all right, I see more detail for each wave. All right, I'll leave it there for the moment. Now, I've now put in, if that was the sound, the big wave was the one for the A, the more rapidly wavy thing here is the A above, because it's twice the frequency.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And if I put this in, that's 3 times. So that takes you to E, E dashed, in fact, all right. Now that's all I need. If I want to see the effect of them all together, I can add them in, and you see how that green wave gets more complicated. So the three waves added together produce a more interesting sound, a sort of sawtooth wave. I think that's the getting nearer the sort of wave you get off a violin, for example. All right, because the string gets stretched out and snaps back, okay? Now, where does Fourier came into this? Well, he showed how it was possible to take any shape of repeating wave like this and break it down into its components. And that's how we actually code musical sounds into an MP3 or MP4 system. We digitize those waves and we break it down into these, and we digitize the breaking down. Now, let's take that out and put this one in. Now, it might be easier if I take those out for the moment. This is going at 330. So since it's 1.5 times that, this and that is an A, this is the E just above middle C. Now its second harmonic is like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And if I draw that one and make sure I include the wave in there, you get that. All right. Now, what happens if let's take these things out. What happens if I sound these two notes simultaneously? Right? This is the A, the green one is the A, and the blue one is the E above it, which is exactly what you do when you want to tune it. You put down the A and the E and pull the tuning key until it's right. Right, now let's sum them together. Right, that's what you're hearing.
Right.
Except, of course, you're not really. I just need to change it. This is as though I'm pulling the tuning hammer into the right position. So this is where it should be. And if I now change the scale, so you see a lot of these, all right, like that. And then I put it slightly out of tune. And I want to pull this a bit further there. All right. You can see that the combined red, if you look at the red bit, let's take the blue and the green out so that they don't confuse it. If you look at the red now,
see the curve.
The amplitude, the overall bit of the amplitude, it's wider in places than others.
Yeah.
And that's the beat. And the beat is occurring between the second harmonic of the E and the third harmonic of the A. And when you get it right, there won't be any beat, which I can just, I hope, if this thing will respond. Right? It's absolutely regular now because I've set the tuning, I've set it in 0 beats, as it were. So that is why you get beats when you're tuning, and it's how you can use mathematics to work out tuning systems, from the very simplest Pythagorean system through mean tone, through various well-tempered systems to equal temperament. So I'm sure you didn't understand all that, but I can produce a document which will explain some of it, which I can email if you want to do that.
That would be helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So what you need to do, so I should have put this on, where's my pen? Can't find my pen. It's somewhere on behind it. Oh, there it is. Right. This is my email. If you haven't got it on. Malcolm, does everybody have our addresses and things? I can't remember.
The simple answer to that is no, they don't.
Right. Can you see that?
No.
Not very clearly.
Can you read it out, letter by letter?
Yeah, it's abacus, ABACUS, at Rest Harrow, which is the name of my house, RESTHARROW.org.
Right, excellent.
Thank you.
I'm going to put that up in the chat for you.
Oh yes, of course you can. Yeah.
I'm going to do it in uppercase, but emails doesn't matter whether they're uppercase.
It doesn't
or
know,
not.
they'll be seen
no,
As
clearly.
you know.
But I hope I haven't taken too much time. It was a bit longer than.
It was absolutely fascinating.
That's
it was
brilliant.
amazing. The best lecture I've heard on tuning in my life. Thank you very much.
Well, I mean, we would like to do these things live, wouldn't we?
Yes.
And if I was doing it live, I would have done it like an old maths thing at one of these UK Maths Trust things, where I'd had a computer and a big screen and all that sort of thing, and everything reacts properly. But there we are.
I would like
welcome.
to say that it was absolutely amazing. And interestingly, when I was at school, we did use logarithm tables, and I've still got that.
Oh, right.
My father, who was a scientist, always used a slide rule, and I still have his slide rule, which is 2 foot long. And when the first calculator came on the market at £80 in the end of the 50s, it was very, very expensive. And then throughout my particular life, all the drug companies would give you little calculators like credit cards that cost them next to nothing.
Like my model slide rule.
Absolutely. but Chairman, that was an amazing lecture, I must say. It was absolutely superb. And I've just put his email up on the chat. If you open the chat, you'll see it.
Right.
Okay.
I'll put together a bit more of document to explain in about a couple of pages, a PDF document to send out to anybody who would like to have it.
Thank you, John.
Okay.
I'm going to bring the
I'm going to release my screen now.
All right, John. I'm going to read from a script which I haven't done before, and I hope I don't bore you to death. This survey of some of the organs on my way, or in case of doubtful quality, in my way, came into being as a result of a rash promise to fill a gap in our calendar of events. The eureka moment for deciding which organs to feature was my copy of Paul Derrett's Benchmarks, series number 11, Organs of East Northants. 5 of the 6 organs featured, for better or for worse, on my way. Today I shall cover a period from the mid-60s to the mid-90s, and Julian will press buttons for illustrations to appear and some musical excerpts, we hope. So please join me in the car then, on my way, as we take the A1 south out of Lincolnshire, turning right at Stamford onto the A43 and keeping our eyes tightly shut, as Grandpa insisted, through the interloper steel town of Corby, the Scunthorpe of Northamptonshire's Rockingham Forest, through Geddington with its Eleanor Cross, arriving in Kettering. Kettering, the holy city, so named in the 19th century on account of mushrooming meeting houses and free church tabernacles. Although the county has been carved up by the M1 and the A14, Kettering and many of the other places I shall mention sits on the old highway, the A6, running from London Carlisle to Carlisle. The Midland Railway follows the basic route of the road. My first experience of hearing an organ was in the Fuller Baptist Chapel, never church, according to Mother, but chapel, you understand the difference. The BMS, Baptist Missionary Society, was founded here in 1792, and growing up, a large and flourishing congregation gave ample scope for experiencing full-throated hymn singing, of hearing Handel organ concerto voluntaries, and then over Sunday dinner, and again, never middle-class Sunday lunch. We didn't have Sunday lunch, we had Sunday dinner. Complaints about the tempo, the choice of hymns, the loudness of the voluntaries, so that one couldn't hear oneself talk. Mimum again, really. I recall an interview with the stern Mr. Sale, FTCL, the organist. My experiments with the stops before formal lessons began, the Dulciana being so soft, I was worried that I had somehow broken the organ. Later, I'd practice on Saturday morning with coffee morning chinks and chatter going on, and the always complaining flower lady whose headache was brought on by organ music and of whom I took no notice whatsoever. That was a fanfare by Arthur Bliss, played by the Reverend Graham Bell on the 3-manual 1903 29-stop Norman and Beard in The Fuller, as the chapel was always called. His CD, compiled in 2014, is thoughtfully played with imaginative registrations, and Graham spent his entire life as a priest in the Anglican Church, kept up his playing and produced this quite later on in his career. And I came across that on my shelf really by accident and thought, oh yes, I know there's at least 2 of us present today that are given recitals on that. And that's my first experience of listening to an organ. And I remember the sound as quite dead. Every pew had got cushions on, and it was normally full of people. and almost no residents whatsoever, but a nice big expanse of polished mahogany. I hope you will agree. There follows several organs we won't be able to hear today, and my own lessons have begun here in the village of Thorpe Malser nearby after a notice in school assembly, and we in the organ class travelling thither in Sir's old Mark V Jaguar, which fetch fantastic prices today if you can find one. Restored in 2011 by Wood of Huddersfield, this is a highly decorated and unusual Cassant organ of about 1880, with 2 manuals but 3 divisions. The choir organ accessed by thumb piston and played from the great keyboard. And like many organs, it is a visual joy. Illustrated notes are to be found online and are well worth reading. I'm really pleased to see that back in use, and I hope now not damp as it was always. It ruined the organ style with it. It's a magnificent thing. Cycling here and other villages, nobbled a lad for 10 shillings a service. I was introduced to the strange world of the Anglicans, Mybeck, Martin Shaw, and intoned parts of the Mass. Series 2, I think, then, wasn't it? Not a worship song on the horizon, nor full-throated singing. Come to that if we perhaps just accept Edgar, who sang very, 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 very loudly indeed, and not quite, perhaps in just intonation, I think it might have been. And we move on.
Yes. Up
the road. Hello, who was that one? We move on to Rothwell Parish Church and one of the Crypt of Skulls, if you can find it, I've put here. A short way north on the A6 was Rothwell, to which our teacher moved, and so of course we moved with him for lessons and practice. The best concert hall in Europe, according to Sir Adrian Bolt. There was for many years an annual visit by a great orchestra. I was present to hear Charles Dutoit in 1967 and Anatole Fistulari probably in 1965. Much later, I returned to be the orchestra, as it were, for Mozart's Requiem. It was not an easy job. Both the building and acoustic are splendid, but the organ was an unremarkable 1898 Wordsworth of Leeds, 3 manual, but hard work. There's plenty of architectural interest in this faded old market town. The crypt is famously full of skulls from the Battle of Naseby. At battlefield, and great swathes of unspoilt country were violated by building the A14, which opened in 1991, in time for that anniversary performance of Mozart's Requiem. And we moved back into Kettering after enjoying the sight of the skulls from Naseby. Yes, good old Oliver. I spent a year as sixth form at William Carey Memorial Church in Kettering as organist and choir destroyer, practicing like mad in an attempt to get to college. The organ is a robust, well-sounding tracker action 2 manual built in 1890 by F.A. Slater of Rosebank Road, Bow, London. I never heard of them, but we have found the name. First standing in Fuller Church and then put up in the new Carey Church in 1912 by Roberts and Tanner of Raunds and Ringstead. More about those 2 places later. The organ is not used regularly now. Apparently it can't play worship songs. Asked to play it a couple of years ago, it withstood well Lefebvre Velli's Sortie in E flat. And if anybody can tell me how to pronounce that gentleman's name, I'd be very happy. I've never met anybody that can. And then we move through Kettering a little bit. We can't leave Kettering without looking at the wonderful tower and spire. Yes, it's a magnificent thing. The church underneath it looks quite modest in comparison. Decorated, not decorated, perpendicular. It's quite a late one there. The organ of the parish church in Kettering, again in the 1890s. It's amazing what was going on in that period. 1892, Nicholson of Worcester, altered with a modernised electrified detached console with tab stops and registration pistons by Walkers in 1939. And it was chosen for me for exam purposes so that I could show I could control an organ with pistons and all the rest of it. The church is better known for its splendid late Gothic tower and spire at 180 feet. that the tower shakes when you're up there ringing. I'm going to hop over years spent as a student and return to the county of my birth to work, older but no wiser, as I still carried on playing the organ, diverting for a few minutes from East Northamptonshire to the west side of the modern A5 and the M1, the boundary line between Alfred the Great's Wessex and the Danelaw. We make a quick visit to Daventry. A dramatic newspaper article of 1859 describes the fire which was caused by the organ tuner, who was named in the article and lucky to get out alive, which gave rise to a new 2-manual 21-stop from Henry Willis in 1860, which was quick work, actually, that, due to excellently arranged insurance arrangements, I think. This remains in the church, but not in the gallery, down on the floor. There are but few papers and letters concerning the organ, but we know that William Spark of Leeds had spent 3 years at Daventry before moving back to Leeds in 1850, and he returned to give the opening recital. He had recommended the builders Gray and Davidson, but conceded that young Willis had made a few good organs and could turn out a good reed stop. A bit condescending, because he'd already put up the 1851 exhibition organ, 10 years earlier. Here, when I was school director of music, we used the organ for the school carol service. The late Kenneth Tickell of Northampton worked on the organ in 1988. Further work may be forthcoming. We cross fingers for that. Today's organist and choir master in Daventry came up from the same senior school as I did, and I've just mentioned he's with us. Very clever at motor engines and rewiring old cars. He is too. Moving across Northants again to the east and into the territories of the Danelaw, we found ourselves living in Findon, and we should now have some music, if we can, of the Findon organ track 1. Please, Julian. That was a preamble by the famous composer Anon on the Father Smith organ at Findon, and it is now known to be Father Smith instrument. So close to the church were our cold and damp former servants' quarters of the old vicarage that we heard with amusement the stentorian tones of the choir master haranguing his choir at Friday practice. Findon is one of the many steepled churches in this county of spires and squires, visible just from the Midland Mainline Railway. The north wind from Burton Latimer wafted down odours of Weetabix, and the Reverend Richard Coles from Radio 4's Saturday Live is now the vicar. This organ, another that is a joy to behold, is nationally famous. It was built for Windsor Castle in the reign of Queen Anne. It was brought north in 1717 by Smith's son-in-law, Christopher Schreider, and I wonder how they ever managed before the railway. It was opened, and it's a very distinguished tale, all this is, by Dr. William Croft, composer and master of the children in the Chapel Royal. The hymn tune St. Anne is attributed to him. He brought the choir with him. A right jolly trip out for the young choristers it must have been. The organ was in 1870 conservatively rebuilt, but internally much reordered and enlarged by George Madewell Holditch, with a pedal board and one pedal stop. In 2014, an historically informed restoration was made. An altered tuning was adopted, which is, John, yes, you're correct, now that called Neidhart for a Small Town. This was mentioned by you, John, earlier this afternoon. Many pieces of present organist Jonathan Harris's new CD are in the keys of G or D, and the sound, of course, very well. But we follow with a more modern piece included to show what can happen if you go outside of safe keys. It is called Parhalia by Kaya May. I'm sure you know that Parhalia means an atmospheric optical phenomenon. I'm sure you knew that. I did, of course, and I didn't have to Google it at all. So number 2, please. The eminent organ expert John Norman was the consultant for the 2014 project, and the organist was the organist himself of the church, Jonathan Harris. Information on the process for this restoration can be found on John Norman's website. John Scott Whiteley has edited Mr. Norman's notes, and this can be found in BIOS Journal of 2017, just assuming they do one a year. John let me have a copy of this, and it's fascinatingly detailed, and just too long for this meeting, but lots of historical research, and it's very, very illuminating. Coincidentally, a second restored royal organ from the Chapel Royal itself stands in Northamptonshire, built in 1819 by Elliot, and stands in Crick on the other side of the county, where the M1 ended in a field. I'm going to include two more short pieces on this organ. It's such an important one, and it sounds much better now than I ever remember it. We hear a Grand Jeu by Clérambault, followed by Trumpet Voluntary, which actually the right hand plays two trumpets, as it were, by Dr. Croft himself. You might have seen on the previous, that picture, this strainer arch helping to support the church upwards. There's another one across the Nen Valley in Rushden, and one of our famous cathedrals at least has got one. I know. Is it Llandaff? I can't remember. But that's a special feature there to stop the walls collapsing, really. So I continue. I hope you're with us still in the car as we go into Wellingborough, and we explored that and found the United Reformed Church. Now, this building is known to the good burghers as the Pork Pie Church. Yes, which it really does look like it a little further from a distance, because you can just see the sort of a crown on top of it. It just looks like a lovely pork pie. And I assisted here for time, and we did concerts, Richard Digance, the folk singer, and the King Singers. And we had a 45-stop, 4-manual Hill/Binns/Compton. Yeah, I'm afraid Compton got at it. It had a double touch on the organ at that time when I first got to know it, and it was jolly good for thumbing down or just thumbing as you played a klaxon horn. The big scaled loud stops were put in the 2 butterflies, I think in the 30s by Compton's, when Head Bond was organist there. Mr. Sale, who was the organist at Fuller, that I showed you at the beginning, was also for a time organist here, and I hadn't realised that, so that would have been perhaps even during the war, I think. He came to Fuller in 44, yeah. Big free church choir festivals were held there, and it was a splendid place to make a lot of noise in. I had a 3-year stint there helping out, but playing many weddings and 1 or 2 pupils. One of whom is with us today. That's Peter from the Isle of Man. Another returning from abroad from Canada to this sceptred isle is booked for membership of our association, and also to give a talk sometime about his Canadian experiences. We had a few good fun organ concerts. Today I suppose it would be a battle of the organs or something like that, but we had an organ and piano and we had good fun. It was good for everything, Sousa marches, any tuba tune you could care to mention, and good old sing-alongs. I'm not quite sure what the service is there that the picture is of. I hadn't seen that, so well done. The organ was first of all in that narrow chamber, and then the console brought down, and it's right on the front, on the floor, in front of the speaker that's standing up. So the congregation's right behind you. The weddings were numerous, but the pub was just across the road. And if you had to wait for an hour for your wedding, well, the blokes anyway, what better place to wait for it than the pub across the road? And it used to be quite lively waiting for weddings to begin. I remember being threatened once from behind when I dared ask people to keep the noise down. So there you go. We have a little bit of music from Wellingborough, the William Lloyd Webber something, and I haven't written down what it is. Anyway, it's a piece of music, just a little bit, so you can hear something of it. Julian, thank you. Oh yes, William Lloyd Webber's Cantilena and a truncated finale, that's what it is. Yep. In remarkably good voice. There's nothing sophisticated about that organ, but it's all sounded in pretty good tune at the end there. So that's a place I spent quite a long time. I was going to include an excerpt also played by Paul Derrett in the Benchmarks CD of the organ at St Mary the Virgin, Wellingborough, which is what you see in front of you. I'm going to hop over that CD recording, Julian, in the light of the clock, basically. This building and the organ is an amazing thing. Please do look it up. It's supposed to be Sir Ninian Comper's masterpiece. The organ is a 1940 20-rank Hill. It sounds lovely. And I was going to play you some music by Samuel Coleridge Taylor. I've included it because, and do not mock, my first and only time I played this was when I and my choir, which was the choir of the Mothers Union, Peterborough Diocese, we held our first carol concert in that. The only other honorary mother was local-based actor Arnold Peters, better known as Jack Woolley from The Archers. And he could do a lovely Jack Woolley if you asked him to. So I'm going to hop over that. That is a beautiful building. It's a Forward in Faith church now, and it seems to be quite busy. And that's the church you can see from the train if you ever travel from the train on the Midland Main Line. So we travel on in our car via Irthlingborough, which was notorious for the treacle mines and foul smells from the leather tannery, of which there are several in the area. And so we go through Irthlingborough. We're not going to hear the organ because it's awful. It certainly was awful. If you can make any pictures appear of Irthlingborough, it's worth looking at the tower for its architecture, Julian. So it was built in the 1380s. The tower was rebuilt in the 1880s because it was going to fall down. I played for a while. I played for a while there with a Walker 9-rank extension, of which the least said the better. Digital organ makers Copeman Hart later established a factory here, and Doc Martens fashion shoes boots were made locally there for some years too. And we go over the River Nen, and I have to mention the local author, now famous for The Darling Buds of May, H.G. Bates. He set the novel Love for Lydia, which was televised in that area. So the medieval road bridge, the concrete replacement, the flooding of the valley, the struggling shoe towns, and a strainer arch was also mentioned. So those of you who know the novel, you know what I mean. Those of you that don't, do give it a read, because it sets this entire bit of East Northamptonshire in a very fine novel indeed. That's Irthlingborough from the air, yeah. That's very clever. I did play at that place, and these things come back to one, don't they? Trying to get some element of discipline within the choir. I got accosted by a very angry mother who said, "Whoa, it's not a cathedral." So, yes. Okay, I'm going to move on, and we go across the river into Higham Ferrers, which again is worth looking at. It's now got a hybrid version of the organ with digital ware installed by Peter Collins. I did go in when he was trying to regulate all that, and we did want to know about it. And I did go to Trona in Sweden to see the first one as well. Digital organ firms have a lot to learn about sound envelopes, he said. His mission to educate them, we think, brought about improvements in the electronic world and digital world, and did indeed attract Carlo Curley to come and live near to Collins's workshops in Melton and Mowbray. I remember the old organ because I got stuck just into a performance of the De Ruffalo Requiem, where the orchestra was just me, when the CCTV failed. and I had to really direct it from the organ gallery, and I don't know what the conductor did, but I think we got through it. But we now turn off the A6 and reach Raunds. So I wonder, Julian, can you flick us through? Thank you. This is not decorated, it's not perpendicular Gothic, it's what they would put in the chapter Early English, with the brooch spire, which there are many on the Northamptonshire, down the valleys there, all standing above the River Nen, otherwise they get flooded. And in there are some nice wall paintings, and this. Yes, there are carved figures with musical instruments and wall paintings found inside. I was introduced to the unexpectedly large 3-manual 38-stop Peter Conacher organ of 1893 for the first time at a shared school concert. The organist at the time insisted on turning his own pages for the Vidor toccata, necessitating a pause in the action at each frantically audible page turn shuffle. We later put on Britain's church opera Noah's Flood in there, and as the organ stood sharp in Old Church Pitch, I think, it erupted with reeds and mixtures blazing with a hair-raising crash, cutting through into the storm sequence, Passacali with J.B. Dykes' hymn tune to Eternal Father Strong to Say. If you don't know the work, try to hear it, and then imagine that organ crashing in, drowning everything, slightly sharp. It was wonderful. Oddly enough, I have to play that hymn tomorrow. This tank of a machine has mainly mechanical action, Barker lever chest giving assistance to the grate. Its clear, bold, classically modelled choruses bear little resemblance to the changing, blander sound trends of the time, such are to be found in the Fuller organ of only 10 years later. Out of Schulze is my way of describing it. Its raw directness features a sharp mixture on the swell, to top the grave mixture on the grate, meaningful 16-foot stops on both swell and grate, gambas with bite, and a choir organ well capable of performing the part of a third 8/4/2 chorus in Baroque music. There is an effective swell box, plus a tiny choir box for the unsugary clarinet and the transparent vox humana. Coupling the manuals to create a rich 8-foot foundation served César Franck's music very well indeed. I was back to playing an organ with no thumb pistons, combination pedals with the feet, with the pedal reeds and the resultant 32-foot, savage enough to blow the congregation out of the building, as the largest and loudest pedal pipes were sighted to speak down the side aisle and at floor level, only a few feet away from any unwarily seated worshipper. We have now C.V. Stamford's Fantasy and the last minute of the toccata to save time. what about that for some raw sound? Well, this has also been restored, yes. Nicholson & Co. of Malvern in 2004. So I'm very pleased, went back to meet people there. We drive our carriage back to Kettering the country way, having no time today to visit Oundle, with its fine 3-manual Frobenius, built in 1984 for the Organ Festival, or, once in Northants, Peterborough, with the cathedral organ, and which has had its pitch lowered and offers no opportunities for teeth on edge clashes. You will notice out of the car window the village of Ringstead, birthplace of Alf Roberts of Grantham, Margaret Thatcher's father, and at one time home of your president's grandfather. We go on and through the village of Cranford, which has 2 parish churches, as Middle Raisin once had, and past the tiny former Baptist chapel, now in private hands. And there should be a picture of the barrel organ that I remember when I was taken to play for evening service by local lay preachers, but on the piano. But it was in working order, and I think it's been donated to Percy Daniels, who were restoring the Fuller organ at the time. Percy Daniels has now Clevedon Organs and restored the Market Deeping organ 2 or 3 years ago. On we drive through Burton Latimer, which is still the home of Weetabix, and nearing Kettering. 2007, I played for the opening of another restoration. That's the 1882 Nicholson and Lord organ, just quite a matter-of-fact small town organ. Another Peter Collins contract in a packed parish church, and yet another one dedicated to St Mary and featuring a sound-absorbing pink carpet. Heritage Lottery demanded and got community participation in return for their money. Several older people came up and rather embarrassingly brought me face to face with my past, recalling my teenage efforts. The present organist is also from our old school. And we trace our steps and re-enter Lincolnshire at Stamford, passing Dean Hall, famous for the charge of the Light Brigade, through Collie Weston, where the roofing tiles come from, and Easton on the Hill, which has a nice 2-manual whole ditch as well. Well, it was nice in 1973 when I went to have a look at it, but driving past it every year since, I haven't bothered to drive off the main road, but apparently it's still there. And the Lincolnshire connection rounds off very nicely because the old music teacher that started us all off, Mr. Till, came from Spalding. But what I'd like to do as we carry on in the car, perhaps dozing a little bit up the A1 or up the A15, which gives a much, much better idea of Lincolnshire, I want us to listen to Graham Bell again on the Norman and Beard organ in the Fuller Baptist Church, Kettering. And I'm putting you back to Graham because this is an example of is a gifted amateur, and I hope I don't embarrass him. He was going to be with us today, but he might just listen back on YouTube. I like this. The playing is thoughtfully done. It's musically played. What we've just heard is Paul Darrett, who's a concert organist, is excellent. That Toccata by Stamford was wonderful stuff. This is a slower piece. It's Frank Bridges' 1905 Adagio in E. It's a fine composer and it's a fine piece. Organ restored in 1987 by Percy Daniels, as I said, and my father was on the committee for that. Electromagnetic action replacing what I remember as a very hissing tubular pneumatic. It has, again, only pedal combination pistons. And basically, if you have been, thank you for listening. There should be some acknowledgements that come up on the screen after that. And I'd just like to thank you very much and thank John for his talk as well. And just to say that we're going to try to come up with ideas for next year's program, which will start in September, not in January, as we have been doing before. The music subcommittee, the events subcommittee is up to 4. Justina's agreed to be on that. We are very, very keen for people to give us ideas. Please be in touch with Julian or any of us really on the committee and the society is only going to be as good as the active participation of its members. So thank you for that. And Julian, I do believe, if you've got it ready for us, Frank Bridge, teacher of Benjamin Britten, Adagio in E.
just finishing, so it'll be